In the bustling streets of Baltimore, Maryland, life often moves at a frenetic pace. Amid the cacophony of urban life, stories of human struggle, resilience, and sometimes despair play out in stark contrast. It was in this city, during the early 2000s, that one of the most chilling tales of religious fanaticism, manipulation, and tragedy unfolded, a story that revolved around a young mother named Rhea Ramkisoon and her toddler son, Javon Thompson. This haunting narrative reveals how faith, when twisted into fanaticism, can lead to unimaginable acts of cruelty. Rhea Ramkisoon was born into a Trinidadian-American family and spent her formative years in Baltimore. Though her upbringing was not devoid of challenges, Rhea was remembered by those who knew her as a kind and gentle soul. Her quiet demeanor and deep desire to belong often left her vulnerable to external influences. By her early 20s, Rhea's life had taken a dramatic turn. She became a single mother to a bright-eyed boy named Javon. Despite the struggles that came with raising a child alone, Rhea loved her son deeply. But the weight of her circumstances, financial instability, lack of familial support, and the isolation of single motherhood pushed her to seek solace in places where vulnerability can easily be exploited. Baltimore, like many cities, has seen its share of religious movements that prey on the disenfranchised. It was here that Rhea encountered One Mind Ministries, a small but fervent cult led by a woman known as Queen Antoinette. Charismatic and authoritarian, Antoinette positioned herself as a prophet chosen by God. Her teachings combined biblical scripture with her own warped interpretations, emphasizing total obedience to her word. For Rhea, the cult offered a sense of community and purpose, a reprieve from the loneliness and uncertainty she faced. Drawn in by their promises of salvation and belonging, Rhea joined the group, bringing Javon with her. This decision marked the beginning of a dark and tragic chapter in her life. Life within the cult was strict and isolating. Members were cut off from the outside world, their every move dictated by Antoinette. Obedience was non-negotiable, and questioning her authority was equated with defying God himself. Over time, Rhea severed ties with her family, becoming fully entrenched in the insular world of One Mind Ministries. By 2006, Rhea had become a devoted follower, willing to adhere to Antoinette's every command. It was during this time that tensions within the cult began to escalate. Queen Antoinette declared that Javon, then just 16 months old, was possessed by a demon. The reasoning behind this shocking claim was as trivial as it was devastating. Javon had refused to say Amen after a meal. Antoinette interpreted the toddler's behavior as a sign of spiritual rebellion, a defiance that could not be tolerated. She decreed that Javon must undergo a cleansing to rid him of the demonic presence. For Rhea, deeply indoctrinated and desperate to prove her faith, Antoinette's word was absolute. What followed was a horrifying act of cruelty. Under Antoinette's orders, Javon was denied food and water as punishment for his supposed possession. Rhea, blinded by her devotion, complied without question. Days turned into weeks as the boy's tiny body weakened under the strain of starvation. His cries for sustenance went unanswered, seen not as a plea for help but as the manifestation of the demon within him. The psychological grip Antoinette held over Rhea was profound. To outsiders, it may seem unthinkable that a mother could allow her child to suffer in such a way. But within the confines of the cult, Antoinette's proclamations were law. Rhea believed that this ordeal was a necessary trial, one that would ultimately save her son's soul. As Javon's condition worsened, Rhea's maternal instincts likely clashed with her indoctrination. Yet, the fear of divine punishment, a fear instilled by Antoinette, overpowered any doubts she may have had. In the end, her unquestioning loyalty to the cult led her to prioritize obedience over her child's well-being. By the summer of 2006, Javon's frail body could no longer endure the torment. The toddler succumbed to starvation, his life cruelly cut short by the very people who were supposed to protect him. But even in death, Javon's suffering was not over. Believing that Javon would be resurrected, Queen Antoinette ordered his body to be kept in a back room, wrapped in a blanket. For months, the cult lived alongside the child's lifeless remains, waiting for the miraculous event that Antoinette had promised. To them, this was not the end but a necessary step in his spiritual journey. As suspicion began to mount, the cult decided to relocate to Philadelphia, taking Javon's body with them. The move was an attempt to evade detection and continue their practices in secrecy. Despite the horrifying reality of her son's death, Rhea remained with the group, her faith in Antoinette unwavering. The cult's new residents did little to alter their dynamic. They continued to live under Antoinette's oppressive rule, adhering to her every command. Javon's body, now mummified from months of neglect, became a grim symbol of their delusion. The charade unraveled in 2008 when former members of One Mind Ministries came forward with information about the group's activities and Javon's death. Acting on these tips, law enforcement raided the cult's residence. Inside, they discovered Javon's remains, still wrapped in the same blanket. The discovery was a macabre scene that left even seasoned investigators shaken. The sight of a child's mummified body, kept in a state of grotesque preservation, was a chilling testament to the cult's fanaticism. For Rhea, the arrest marked the beginning of a reckoning with the consequences of her actions. Rhea Ramkissoon, along with Queen Antoinette and other members of the cult, was charged in connection with Javon's death. The trial became a focal point for discussions on cult psychology, religious extremism, and the vulnerabilities of individuals seeking guidance. Prosecutors portrayed Rhea as a willing participant in her son's death, while her defense argued that she had been brainwashed. Expert witnesses testified about the methods cult leaders used to manipulate their followers, stripping them of their autonomy and instilling a fear of disobedience. Rhea's own testimony revealed the depth of her indoctrination. She expressed remorse for her actions, acknowledging the role her blind faith had played in Javon's death. Her diary entries, introduced as evidence, painted a picture of a woman torn between her love for her son and her fear of defying Antoinette. In 2009, Rhea pleaded guilty to child abuse resulting in death. As part of her plea deal, she agreed to testify against Antoinette and other cult members. Her cooperation led to convictions for the cult leader and several followers. Following her conviction, Rhea was required to undergo deprogramming therapy, a process designed to help her break free from the cult's influence. Over time, she began to confront the reality of her actions and the manipulation that had led her to commit them. In interviews, Rhea spoke about her regret and the profound impact Javon's death had on her. She described herself as a victim of Antoinette's control, but she also took responsibility for her role in the tragedy. Her story served as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unchecked religious extremism and the vulnerabilities of those seeking guidance. The case of Javon Thompson sent shockwaves through Baltimore and beyond. Vigils were held in his memory, and local organizations pledged to increase support for single mothers and at-risk families. Advocacy groups used the case to push for greater awareness of cult dynamics and the need for better protective measures. Law enforcement agencies began implementing specialized training to recognize signs of cult activity, while social workers advocated for more rigorous child welfare checks. Javon's name became a symbol of the need for vigilance and compassion in protecting society's most vulnerable members. The story of Rhea Ramkissoon and Javon Thompson is a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of blind faith and manipulation. It is a tale of a mother's love twisted into compliance, of a community's failure to protect a child, and of a society grappling with the complexities of religious extremism. Though Javon's life was heartbreakingly short, his story continues to resonate, urging society to confront the forces that prey on the vulnerable and to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated. Even after the legal proceedings concluded, the case of Javon Thompson lingered in the public conscience. Experts in psychology and sociology dissected the events, trying to understand how an otherwise loving mother could be driven to such extremes. Cult deprogramming specialists pointed to Rhea's vulnerability, her isolation as a single mother, and her search for community as the primary factors that made her susceptible to the manipulation of One Mind Ministries. Queen Antoinette, the mastermind behind the cult, remained defiant throughout her trial and imprisonment. She continued to claim divine authority, showing no remorse for the atrocities committed under her leadership. This unrepentant demeanor only added to the chilling nature of the case, cementing her as a figure of ruthless manipulation and control. Rhea, meanwhile, became an emblem of the complexities of culpability. Was she a criminal or a victim? public opinion was divided, with some viewing her as a tragic figure ensnared by a predatory cult, while others saw her as an accomplice who failed in her most basic duty as a mother. The surviving members of One Mind Ministries faced an uphill battle in reclaiming their lives. Many struggled with feelings of guilt, shame, and confusion as they tried to reintegrate into society. For those who had fully bought into Antoinette's teachings, the process of unlearning was fraught with emotional turmoil. Therapists and counselors worked with the former members to help them understand how they had been manipulated. Techniques such as gaslighting, isolation, and the promise of divine favor were common tools used by Antoinette to maintain control. Recognizing these methods was the first step toward healing, but for many the scars ran too deep to ever fully recover. Ria, in particular, found it difficult to reconcile her past actions with her present reality. In interviews conducted years later, she spoke about the nightmares that haunted her and the crushing guilt she felt for her role in Javon's death. While she continued to work through her trauma, she also became an advocate for others who had experienced similar manipulation. The case of One Mind Ministries sparked a national conversation about the nature of cults and the methods they use to recruit and control members. Lawmakers and activists pushed for greater awareness and education on the subject, advocating for resources to help those who might fall prey to similar groups. Schools began incorporating lessons on critical thinking and the dangers of blind obedience into their curriculums, while community organizations worked to provide support for isolated individuals who might be vulnerable to cult influence. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies also took note, developing specialized task forces to monitor and investigate potential cult activities. The hope was that by understanding the psychological and sociological factors that contribute to cult formation, authorities could prevent tragedies like Javon's death from occurring in the future. For those who knew Javon, his death remains a source of profound sorrow. The toddler, once full of life and potential, became a casualty of a system that failed to protect him. His story serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and the need to address the root causes of vulnerability. Today, Javon's memory is honored through programs aimed at supporting at-risk children and single parents. His name has become a rallying cry for those working to dismantle cults and provide resources for those who might be caught in their grasp. While Ria Ramkissoon's journey is one of deep tragedy, it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her efforts to atone for her past and help others avoid similar fates demonstrate the capacity for growth and redemption, even in the face of unimaginable darkness. The case of One Mind Ministries may be closed, but its lessons endure, a chilling cautionary tale of the devastating power of manipulation and the strength it takes to break free.